Hi everyone and welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and I was away for about a week last week, and as soon as I got back I got right back to trying to get caught up on all my worm bins. And one of the first things I did when I got back was I wanted to tend to my two oldest worm bins, which are the ones that are right here next to me up on the shelf. And at that time I had gone ahead and I'd taken my oldest bin and I fed it, but this second oldest bin right here, I decided that it was time to let this one get driven towards completion. And the main reason is that I had been experiencing a lot of moisture in the oldest of the bins, and I had put in a lot of bedding materials, a lot of dry leaves, stuff to try to absorb the moisture and address the moisture situation. But as a result of that, the thing is chock full of a lot of uncomposted bedding type materials now. So I believe mainly for that reason that bin's going to require a little bit more time at this point to really get to the finish line. But in the case of this bin right here, I never really experienced a moisture problem. So I was really able to kind of determine that with this bin, I can really let it start making its way to getting finished off, so that I can try to harvest the material out of the bin and relocate the worms. It was only 63 days that had passed when I made that decision to make that last feeding. And then most recently when I came in here 5 days ago, I decided, no, I'm not going to feed. I'm going to continue letting this one ride. And 11 days, 5 days, it's been 16 days now since this bin was last fed. And okay, 16 plus 63, that makes this bin 79 days old at this point. Is that right? Yeah, it is. So I did make some notes here to try to encapsulate the thinking here in terms of information that I'm talking about. So the 79 bin is the one on the bottom there. You could see over that time it had received 9 feedings, and it's been 16 days since the last feeding. And like I said, I've really decided it's time to let that bin kind of enter its foraging phase, its starving phase. But the problem is that there is some kind of slow composting food items in there still. I believe there's a mango seed in there, which would take forever to break down. So I guess to make it more of an official foraging stage and starving phase, I thought it would be best at this point to actually go back in there and actually remove any sort of larger food items that might still be in there. And at that point I could really feel like the worms will have a chance to really start breaking down any residual little scraps of bedding or food that might still be in there. And that should really help us get to the point where we can harvest this container a little bit more quickly. So the older of the two bins, the 115-day-old bin, was the one that we checked in on only 5 days ago. But we're going to go in there after we've removed some of the food items that we're going to pick out of the second oldest bin, and we're just going to drop them into that bin over there. So shouldn't take too long, and none of this is really going to count as a formal feeding as far as I'm concerned. To me, it's really more about trying to make sure that this bin is truly in the kind of finishing, foraging, starving phase, as I refer to it. So let's get in here and get to work. So it should be pretty straightforward locating the food that's in here, the remainder of the food that's in here, because the last time we were in here we did attempt to reorganize things in here to make sure that the food was all in one particular location. And as usual, I put it down the middle. And the only thing we're going to need here is just a little something to put the stuff that we collect into, so that we can move it over into the other container. A lot of times I'll take extra effort to make sure that I'm not leaving a lot of worms on my pieces of paper or plastic that I remove. But I think we're going to be able to do this pretty quickly. So I'm thinking maybe I'm just going to fold this in half. And hopefully that'll keep the worms from feeling like they need to run away to get to a darker place by having the paper folded over. And hopefully that'll prevent them from wanting to squirm away and end up in a dangerous dry spot somewhere. So let's hope that this is going to work. Hopefully we don't end up with a number of worms that have met their demise. And we could just put this aside as well. Oh yeah, besides the one item that I knew was in there, which is the mango pit, slow composting food item, there's also this apple, which You know, you would generally think that it would take little or no time for worms to make their way through an apple, but it's not really the case. Certain things that you think might take no time at all to be consumed, like an apple or maybe like a corn cob or something like that, I've always found to take quite a bit of time. So my thinking was, whether it's an apple, whether it's a mango seed, whatever the case may be, I really want to get this down to the point where the only stuff remaining in here is tiny little scraps of leaves. Little tiny scraps of remaining food are okay, because that'll be hopefully stuff that they could break down pretty quickly and help this bin finish off. But anything larger, I'd really prefer to just, at this point, scoop it out of here and relocate it into that other bin that I think is going to be around for a little while longer. And who knows, we might get to the same point at that other one, in that other bin as well, too, where we decide, hey, we want to get this bin to be finished, and let's get everything out of there. That looks like it's going to take a long time. So, so I think anytime I see something like, you know, larger scraps of paper, or bedding, or food, I'm just going to go ahead and pull them out of here, and we're going to put them all into that other bin. All right, so I think this is really what I had in mind right here, was this mango seed, which is actually quite a long ways off. It's actually quite far along, if you will, in terms of being broken down. There's like that actual seed portion of it that's inside the husk, which I don't see in here anymore. I believe they've already eaten that. That's probably the most nutritious part of it. But you can see that they're also actually working the shell itself down. You can see what I had done to these shells. I had punctured them to try to give worms access, because if you just put a mango seed into your worm bin without having any sort of openings on it or anything, then you could certainly expect to see that thing in there for a very, very long time. So you do need to be able to give the worms some way of getting at the food item. Here too, we've got the stem of a banana. So I'm just maybe thinking the food type stuff, put it on one side, put the bedding type stuff on the other side. And it did seem like, you know, from looking at the stuff in this bin, this stuff is really nice. It would really be nice to see this bin get to the finish at some point soon, but all of this paper, all of this leafy stuff, all this stuff that I had put in here to try to combat the moisture, just seemed like it was going to take way too long to get done. It's pretty interesting. This is like the stem of a, I thought it was a pumpkin, but I believe it's really the stem of a spaghetti squash. And I've seen stems of pumpkins break down in my bins over time, and I was expecting this spaghetti squash stem to take just as long, but it looks like it's actually breaking down quite quickly. And this thing here too is funny, because I looked at this last time, tried to figure out what the heck it was, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I still don't know what it is. But it looks to me like more like in the food category as opposed to being in the bedding category, so I'm putting it in with the food pile. You know, at some point maybe it is okay to leave a certain amount of this stuff in here, because I'm sure once all the more flavorful, nutritious food items are pulled out of here, like that apple, the worms will turn their attention to any other stuff in here that's still edible type food stuff, even if it is just cardboard, and hopefully they'll do away with it more quickly than if the apple were still in there. I believe the apple may have been possibly the one thing in here that would have really contributed to the worms, you know, kind of not focusing on the remainder of the material in the bin, which is really where I'd like for their attention to be at this point. And I believe last time I was in here I did sort of focus everything down the middle, so I think it's also fair to assume that all this paper and cardboard material is all in the middle at this point, so pulling it out should be pretty straightforward. You just saw me kind of till up the bottom, and I exposed the majority of it on this side. And I believe we're going to find a similar thing over on this side. Let me just pick it all out, and we'll get it all in here so we can move it all over. You can see there's a good amount of it in here. Here's the pile of paper and cardboard is actually starting to stack up pretty good. The castings are really, really nice. You could tell just from when I'm, going through it, none of this stuff sticks to itself. It all just flakes away, crumbly, loose. But not dry. Definitely has some nice cool moisture content to it. So you can see I've gotten the majority of it out of here already at this point, I believe. On this side at least. So I think this side closer to me at this point might be the only spot where we're going to find any more. So let's go right to the bottom on this side now and see what we see. Hopefully it'll reveal the last of the stuff that I'm trying to collect quickly. And then we'll be able to let this bin get back to work. And at this point the work will in fact be the worms trying to find anything in here that still resembles food or edible materials, and they won't have big chunks of food like the apple or slow composting items like the mango seed. They will be required to turn all their attention to all the other tiny particles in here that are not being removed. And hopefully, let this bin get to the point where we can harvest it pretty soon. I don't venture to guess how long it might take. It's always kind of a guessing game in terms of how long it might take to reach a certain goal in your worm bins. There just seem to be so many variables that influence the way things progress in a bin. But I guess the one thing that this bin has going for it is what I estimate to be a fairly large population of worms. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the guesstimate, if you will, I've been running on with this bin, as well as the other bin that we're going to be dropping all of this food and bedding into. I've been operating on the estimate of something in the neighborhood of about 4,000 worms in each of these two bins that we're going to be checking in on today. Okay. I really think we've pretty much accomplished what we were after here today. And it's really not that much if you think about it. It might be about half of what you would normally put in as a feeding, combined with what might amount to a typical quantity of bedding you might add in a normal feeding. So it may really have just taken a couple weeks worth of time for them to actually do away with this stuff here. But since I did decide 5 days ago not to feed anymore, and that I really wanted to let this bin start getting finalized, I figured I'd just try to help it out a little bit by actually removing anything that might become a hindrance or something that might slow the progress of that activity down. And I got a feeling that with all of this larger stuff removed, we're probably going to see this bin get to the finish pretty quickly. So, I'm just going to fluff through here a little bit, see if I could see any final bits of stuff that seem like I would want to remove it. But I believe I've gotten the majority of it at this point. Sometimes I'm not sure if what I'm pulling out is a chunk of food or if it's a piece of cardboard or paper or what. But I think I've done a pretty good job classifying the materials that I've extracted here. So we'll just go do a final little combing through of the stuff here so we can really get another nice look at how this stuff all looks. And I think you'll agree with me, the stuff looks really nice. I think I've also, just with that last little shaking around of the material, spotted a few more things that are good candidates for removal. But I got a feeling we're not going to see much, if any, more of that kind of stuff in here at this point. One thing you can definitely see, though, as I kind of rummage around is a plentiful number of worms pretty much no matter where you look. So I've got confidence in these little guys that they're going to make this container nothing more than a pile of beautiful castings in a very short amount of time, I would have to guess. So I'm actually putting my collection box down at this point, just on the assumption that we're probably not going to find anything else that requires removal. And you know what? I think I said that out loud based on the fact that by doing so, I probably find something. So, yeah, not much though. Definitely not much. And I believe I had already done a pretty good job combing through here previously, removing everything from the outer reaches of the bin out here on the far ends, so that I can centralize it and put it all down the middle. So I don't think out on the far edges we should expect to see too much stuff like this. This actually looks to me like maybe a plastic sticker label. Yeah. So that doesn't belong anywhere in either of these containers. It belongs in the trash. All right, so I guess since we checked out that far edge, we might as well do the same here and then we'll be done. Again, I'm hoping not to find anything in here other than worms and castings. And it seems every time I say that out loud, I do stumble on something that seems worthy of removal. But at this point, I believe we've definitely got ourselves what amounts to almost nothing more than castings and just little tiny particles here and there. This is kind of funny. Look at this. Looks like a little worm volcano. This is really like the stem of something, but the worm has made itself right through the center of it. And since it's shaped like a little funnel, almost like a little volcano with the worm sticking out the top, it almost looks like the worm is the plume of the volcano erupting. So we'll evict the worm, but we'll also remove the stem. And I think we're done. So as I usually do, I'm going to level things off here nicely. Okay. Man, such nice material and just the perfect moisture level and consistency. It's like I wish all my worm bins were like this. All right, you know what? I keep finding stuff, and not that I don't want to find any more stuff, but I just also don't want to take the entire day going back in here and once again trying to find stuff when I should be confident in the fact that I've probably got the majority of what I was after. So yeah, let's call it at that, and let's just leave it to the worms to take care of the rest, right? Because at this point, for the most part, everything should be fairly puny bits and pieces. And if we miss something large, then that's just a bonus for them. I don't expect that there's going to be a lot of that in here, though, at this point. I think we did a really nice, thorough job. So this stuff should really be coming along nicely at this point over the next couple weeks. And yeah, I mean, for a 79-day-old bin, we're 21 days. We're exactly 3 weeks away from it reaching its 100th birthday. And if I had to guess, I would like to think that by then we should expect to be able to harvest this batch. Which means prior to that, trying to lure the worms out of the material by trying to feed them over on one side of the bin and encourage them to move into that new feeding area. But I think we'll do that only after they've had a chance to work this stuff over for maybe at least a week or so. So, I don't know. Sounds like a slightly flimsy plan. Sounds like it might be a bit optimistic to expect that by day 100 this bin would actually be finished. But I don't think it would take much longer than that if it was not possible to do it by then. I believe we could probably get pretty close to that as far as rough estimates. Anybody care to take any bets at this point? Okay, let's give these little guys hanging out here on this container a break. I'm going to treat this as also potential food that I'm going to deny them of. This is really my way of marking where feedings have occurred, and we've just kind of done the opposite. We've removed any residual food at this point. There's certainly no reason to keep a feeding zone indicator in the bin. So I guess if they really start to get desperate, they can always turn to this sheet of paper that's covering the top, and they can always nibble on this a little bit if they need to. So we certainly can't say that we're leaving them with absolutely nothing to eat. Between the scraps remaining in the container, as well as that large sheet of newspaper covering things across the top, there's certainly stuff in here that can sustain this bin for quite a while. But I hope we've geared it up nicely here to help us get to the finish line more rapidly than if we hadn't. So at this point we're just going to keep our fingers crossed. So let's get the oldest of my bins out here, and then we can dump in all that stuff that we collected, and then we'll be done. Oh my goodness. So like I said, this bin is it's close to being twice the age of the bin we just checked in on. No, I'm not sure that's correct. But it's got about a month's time on it, so it's at least a month older. And here you can see what I was referring to earlier by all the leafy material that I had been using in this bin to try to dry things off. It was a couple weeks ago, or maybe just a week ago or so. It was not too long ago that I kind of came to the determination that the drying off efforts that I'd been employing were in fact successful. So I felt like I had reached the point where this bin was no longer too wet anymore. So it was at that time I started taking a lot of this leafy stuff that was sitting out on the top and trying to dump it down into the area where I was applying the feedings, to try to give it all a chance to get broken down a little bit more quickly than if it was just resting out on top. So on this go around, I don't think we're going to do that, because even though we are bringing over some additional food to drop in here, we've also got some bedding that's coming along with it as well. So I believe that this stuff will continue to just sit out on the top surface, for now at least, up until maybe some other upcoming feeding in the near future, at which point we'll sink it down into the bed. But we do need to make ourselves a little bit of space in here alongside all of the older food items that had been placed in here previously. So I'm going to see what I could do about just kind of piling things up and opening up a big enough gully over here that we can apply all of that stuff that we're moving over into. But I also don't want to end up with all kinds of food items sticking out the top either. So my hope is that I've pushed enough material off to the side with which we can cover up with in the end. Let's just take these couple items. I just moved this pumpkin stem off to the side because I would like that to be sort of front and center within my feeding zone, so we can always kind of stumble on it first when we dig back down into here in the future. So that's one of those things that is a slow composting item, but it's also something I'm interested in seeing how long it's going to take to get completely, broken down. That's one thing I normally try not to do. I try not to help along the process. I really like to see how long nature would take to break it down on its own, so I really didn't mean to shatter it that way, but that's okay. It's all in good fun. All right, let's get this stuff in here. I think this apple's going to be kind of a fun thing to check in on, so we'll leave it there next to the pumpkin stem, of which there's really not much left at this point. And then all these other things that were classified as food type items, including what's left of this mango seed, as well as this weird whatever the heck that thing was. Just trying to look at it now. Looking at it edge on, I'm wondering if I can identify what it is just based on its kind of appearance, but nah, I'm not sure what it is. Banana stem. Not bad. I guess we'll just preserve this coffee filter as a feeding zone indicator to go along with that piece of paper that was doing that same job up until now. So here too are some food things. We're going to try to make sure they're down low. And then we can take all of this reclaimed bedding type material that we salvaged and get it all in here as well. So who knows how long this bin is going to take. It could take some time, and that'll be okay, but it did seem like with that other bin, it really seemed like it made a lot of sense to start driving it towards completion. And at some point we might decide to do something similar here too. We might just decide that, hey, it's time to pull out all those slow composting items and put them elsewhere and give this bin a chance to make its way to the finish as well. Yeah. But I'm just kind of following my gut feeling, and I think I'm doing the right thing. So hopefully everyone agrees. All right, just leveling things off here at this point. Trying to also make sure there's no huge food chunks anywhere right on the top. And you know, it's kind of nice to see all this leafy material gradually dwindling down to the point where there's really hardly any of it left. Because I did have quite a bit in here, and I'd like to see it all broken down at some point soon. I am definitely reaching a point where I might feel like I'm almost at the limit. So I usually use the capacity of a bin as my indicator to tell me if it's time to start driving towards completion. And this bin is definitely getting to that point soon. Okay, I was just curious about moisture, so I want to take one more peek down there in the corner just to see if, you know, by chance I might encounter some really damp or muddy material. But I think that that whole situation has ended at this point. But you know, at some point I might actually decide to try to lock in and say, hey, you know, this is a good moisture level. There's no more need to allow for, you know, the encouragement of evaporation and drying of the material. And, you know, to try to encourage that drying and evaporation, I had removed the plastic coverings that had been on this bin to allow for evaporation and drying. But I think we've actually reached the point where we might decide at some point to supplement these covers with a piece of plastic to kind of, you know, lock in whatever moisture is in here, not allow it to continue escaping, because we could end up on the other end of the spectrum with a bin that's a bit too dry, which we don't want to have either. So, all right, everyone, I think that's it for today. So I've got a little bit of cleaning up to do around here, and I'll put everything away. But you know what? Before I do that, and before I shut the camera off, let me just really quickly say thank you. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to give me a quick thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's always really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Take care now. Bye.